here so we can have you all out of here by 11. And before we jump into this, let me introduce myself. My name's Jody Bailey. I'm the Chief Audit Executive here, Utah State. I've been here for 20 years. I was 10 years as a staff auditor, and I've been now 10 years as Chief Audit Executive. So have a little bit of experience with internal controls, and where this training came from is I meet with the audit committee of the Board of Trustees usually 4 times a year, and I present all of my audits to them. And we were having repeat findings, and they said, you know, aren't there like some top 10 controls that if everybody put these in place would take care of 95% or 99% of these findings? And I said, absolutely. And so they requested that I put together this training, share this information, and these, if you do have these controls in place, these will take care of 95% of the problems that we see when we're conducting audits. So that's where this came from. And also, just to let you know, it's not just me. I have a team of auditors that works for me. I have them specialized in different areas. Jana's over financial and tax. I have Nicole does P-card and risk assessment. Ben is actually the idea specialist, but if you have a Banner question, where to find data in Banner, he can point you to the right table because he is familiar with most, if not all, tables in Banner Finance and Banner Student. And then Tessa is over research matters or sponsored funding. So if you, anything with sponsored funding, federal grants, she's the one to send your questions to. And then Carmela keeps us all together. So we're going to switch now from those of you that are seeing my face, the main.
Yep, they're doing it now.
Okay, you should see. Okay, and just to let you know, USU does have a code of conduct. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with this, but in the green there, you'll see the hyperlink to where you can find this. And the one thing I wanted to point out that it does focus on integrity and ethical practice. And we'll talk a bit about that. We'll focus on that at the end of this presentation because that's the core to a strong system of internal controls is strong ethics, a good ethical value system, it's called a control environment. So if you don't have that in place, the other 10 controls are pretty much useless. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Why the need, what's the purpose of internal controls, who's responsible. There's confusion over who's responsible, whether, you know, Steve as a business manager is responsible, me as internal audit, we're responsible, who is responsible. I'm going to go over the top 10 list, and then we're going to talk about the importance of strong ethical values. So why do we need a strong system of internal control? You guys have all experienced. Each year as I've been here 20 years, we've had continued decreases in state funding. I think that's going to continue. So our funds are limited. We have to do more with less. Private donors are getting very selective, and not only are they selective, they want to know how our money's being spent. Once they donate that money to USU, they want reports, they want information. So there's a need for greater transparency as to how we're spending the funds, that we're spending things appropriately. And we also have a law now, our 2510, that requires us to report revenue, expenses, and employee compensation on the State of Utah Public Finance website. So people want to know how we're spending our money, so we need to be careful with how we're spending those funds. So the purpose of a strong system of internal control, I'm not going to go over this whole list, but what I want to point out is a lot of people think it's just financially based. It's not just financially based. Internal controls cover a whole gamut of things. Protect the assets, keep us in compliance with laws and regulations, give us guidelines. What are those boundaries that I need to operate within? So take a look at that list, but the number one thing I want to point out, it's here to protect employees. Every time we've seen where an internal control system has failed, and fraud has occurred, employees lose their job, we have one serving a jail sentence right now. We want to protect employees. We want to take away, we'll talk about the fraud triangle a little bit, but whenever fraud occurs, there is an opportunity for that fraud. We want to take away that opportunity, and that's what a strong system of internal controls does, is even if the person is under pressure, financial pressure, has the ability to rationalize and say it's just a one-time thing, we're going to close down that opportunity. So if you see that there is a missing control, you need to step in and say, okay, I'm not saying that you're going to commit fraud. I'm just going to protect you from ever having to make that decision, that if you're in a situation that you would tip over to that point. So that's the purpose. It's not just for red tape and to get in your way and to be a hindrance. It's to protect you, to make sure, you know, you're not the only person involved in a transaction. So who's responsible? Administration will establish and monitor the controls. So those are the controller's office, upper administration. Steve's involved with some of this, setting what those controls are and what our guidelines are. Internal Audit Services, which is my group, we evaluate and test the controls. How well are they working? Is what you set in place, is it actually working, or is there a missing control? We'll give guidance with that. And then everyone has a role in this to understand and implement the controls. And we're not talking about every control that the university has, every policy that the university has. You need to understand the controls that apply to your job and your process, what you're responsible for. If you're dealing with federal funds, you need to understand those federal guidelines. If you're getting grants or if you're getting state funds, what are the guidelines as to how those funds should be used? So you need to understand and implement the controls. So here's the list, my Letterman list of top 10 controls. And we'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail. You don't need to write all these down right now. We'll go through each of them one by one. So the number one control is approval, authority, and responsibility. When you sign something or approve something, it should mean something. You need to understand what you're signing and approving. Blind controls is the biggest issue we have, the biggest finding we have. People approving something that they don't know exactly what they're approving. If you don't understand what it is in Banner, figure out how to get through those screens to understand what you're approving, or ask questions. Ask, is the expenditure reasonable and appropriate? Is it for legitimate university business? If I'm not sure, I'm going to ask those questions. If somebody's buying candy, is this for the office or is this for a 4-H program? Ask those questions. Does the backup documentation support it? Are there funds available in the index that's being charged? And is the funding source appropriate? Am I charging if I'm dealing with a grant? Is the proper funding source charged? If you guys have questions as I go through this too, just pop in and ask your question. If you don't understand it, can't vouch for it, don't sign or approve it. You become responsible once you put your approval on it. And another thing, I don't see this so often on campus, but sometimes in the smaller locations we see this, where a supervisor will request that a staff assistant or a subordinate sign their name in their place in their absence. So my staff assistant's name is Carmela. Me requesting Carmela to sign my name, that's forgery. She can sign Carmela de Guzman for Jody Bailey, but she cannot sign my name or put my initials on a document. So if you're ever asked to do that, that's not appropriate. Delegation. Understand when you delegate or assign a proxy in Banner for your approval, you can delegate the process, but not the responsibility. You're still responsible if they are your proxy. Make sure you select appropriate personnel to do this. If you look at University Policy 519, it addresses this, who's an appropriate EPAF proxy. They should be an exempt employee, not a non-exempt, because that pushes them over into fair labor FLSA issues. So you want to make sure you have somebody that's exempt and assure they have the knowledge, skills, and ability to do the task. I would not assign my staff assistant as my proxy. I need to assign someone that's at either a level above me or one of my higher level auditors to be my proxy. So then you still need to, once you assign that, you don't just wash your hands of it and you're done with the process. You need to monitor and review what is being approved by your delegate. We've seen, instances where complete delegation of signing authority has happened and the director will remove themselves from the process. We had a center where the director of the center delegated all approving authority to his assistant director. He was buying personal computers, he was buying games, Xboxes, clothing. He rented an apartment. The director had no idea. He was signing the director's name. He even had a stamp with the director's name, a stamp signature. And he had just was trusting this guy, which, we trust people. We don't hire people we don't trust, and we put them in positions of authority because we do trust them. But you can't just wash your hands of it. You need to take a look and see what's happening. The second control goes hand in hand with the approving authority, reconciliations, and reviews. This is the best control to detect and prevent errors. If people know you're doing your reconciliations, that will prevent a lot of errors from occurring or fraud from occurring because people know you are reviewing what's happening on your index. If you have several indexes that you're responsible for example, Steve, I'm sure has hundreds of indexes that he is responsible for ultimately. I'm not saying you have to go through, at his level, go through each and every transaction. What I'm saying is quickly scan through the vendors, the people that we paid. Does it make sense? The employees that were charged on this index, does that make sense that they were charged at this index? If Michael's Craft Store is charged on this index, is that questionable or does that make sense for what they're doing? Just take a high-level review and then take a review in the change of fund balance. Okay, if it went down by $1,000 this month, that makes sense. If it went down by $10,000, do I need to question what happened here? Why did that drop? So take a look at the vendors, people that are charged on the index, and then take a look at the change in fund balance. The best thing is to document your review so you can remember that you've done it, and then if we ask if you've done it, you have proof. With the electronic documentation, you can save it as a PDF and put your initials on it electronically. You don't have to print everything out to just say you've reviewed this every month. And it should be completed within a month from the issuance of the banner statements. Once it's out there, if it's out there 3 to 6 months, you kind of forget what happened 3 months ago. Was that appropriate or not? So timely reviews are the best. The third control is to protect your data and assets. Secure devices containing data. Don't share your password with anyone. We just completed a fraud review for an area on campus where a supervisor had requested a subordinate to share her password. And it was the first day she was hired, she was like, I'm your supervisor, I need your password. And the subordinate was a bit naive and shared her password. What this person was doing was going in and doing inappropriate transactions on her own login as well as her subordinate's login. So it was hard to tell that this other person wasn't involved in the fraud because her supervisor was logging in as her. So don't share your password with anyone. Even IT doesn't need your password. If they need to change something on your account, your login, they'll reset your password for you. So don't share it with anyone. Review your files, especially your sites in remote locations. We tend to, when we go out to those sites, find old documentation that has anything that has a social security number, a driver's license number, or a credit card on it. You need to either get rid of that documentation if you no longer need it, or if you do need that documentation, you need to redact that, black out the social security number, the credit card, or the driver's license information. We'll find this on employment applications, some student forms, because we used to use the social security number as the identifier. We'll find it on I-9s. I-9s are, if anybody gets a hold of an I-9, they can steal an identity. You've got everything you need on an I-9. Driver's license, social security number, everything. So go through your files and see what you have. And don't just get a Sharpie and block things out, because you can hold up a Sharpie to the light. You can hold it up to the light and see what the numbers are. You need to actually get a redacting pen. And you can get those at Office Depot, anywhere. Get a redacting pen and black out that information. So go through those files. Locked doors and file cabinets, which contain sensitive information. We reviewed one area on campus and we were able to, they didn't know who we were. My staff went into this office, just opened drawers and started thumbing through drawers to see what they could find. And there was a file cabinet that contained all information from former professors. It had pictures, driver's license, credit cards, social security numbers, everything. And so if we wanted to, take that file and use it inappropriately. They didn't even realize they had that information there, and they let us into what was supposed to be a secure location. And another thing is to collect cash in as few locations as possible. Cash obviously is inherently risky. Anytime you're processing cash, if you don't need to process cash, don't. But collect it in as few locations as possible. Okay, the fourth control is separation of duties. This is the best way to avoid mistakes and prevent fraud. And like I said, it seems like red tape to have somebody else involved in the process, but it is the best protection for you as an employee. If we find something that's gone wrong, is inappropriate, um, you can, if there's another person that's involved in the process, it's like, it wasn't just me. My supervisor reviewed this, approved this, it was okay. So that's the best way to avoid mistakes and prevent fraud. And think about it this way, separating the ABCs, the asset handling, the booking and recording of the transaction, and the comparison or review of transactions. The A and B usually goes together, asset handling and booking. So usually when you receive cash, you're the one that records the transaction in Banner, or if you're processing the payment, you're the one that records it in Banner. That's where a second person should then complete the monthly reconciliation and review to have that protection and that oversight for you. Sometimes it's impractical or impossible in the small sites to separate these. This is when supervisory oversight or even oversight at Steve's level is important to put a compensating control in place. And then there are times when we just accept the risk. Okay, we can't segregate this process, but the risk of loss is $50 a day. It's not worth hiring a second employee to protect $50 a day. We'd pay more for that second employee. So you kind of do a cost benefit. As long as you're thinking about it and saying, okay, I understand there's a risk here, I'm going to accept it. So you know what the risk is. And do what you can to protect yourself. Okay, the fifth one is to be familiar with university policies and regulations, guidelines, anything that's applicable to what your position, your role. They provide guidance. They help you understand what you're responsible for. Noncompliance with federal or state regulations can cause loss of funding, fines and penalties, reputational risk. I mean, nobody wants to read about it in the paper, and even possible debarment if something extreme were to go wrong. So you need to make sure you're familiar with the policies, procedures, and regulations that are applicable to your position. The sixth control is there needs to be appropriate use of university resources. Avoid the mentality of, this is my funding. We see this a lot in sponsored research where people will go out and they wrote the grant, they pulled the funding into the university, so they view it as, this is my funding. It's all university funding once it comes into the university umbrella. All the university policies apply. There's no personal use of university funds. Even there's confusion with indirect costs or F&A reimbursements that you can spend those however you want. Make sure if it's university funds, it's spent within university policies. Clearly document where you have instances of personal and business use being commingled. Personal travel and business travel, sometimes, we'll tag personal travel at the beginning of a trip and then have a conference in the middle. We've seen requests for reimbursement where people are requesting reimbursement for the entire 7 days they were gone, and the conference was only the middle 3 days. So clearly document that, okay, this is personal, this is business, I'm only claiming the business travel. Don't use USU resources for personal gain. The most extreme, well, not most extreme, but a good example of this where there was confusion as to what a university resource is I had a faculty member who had a business on the side, and he was requesting his staff assistant process invoices and billing for this side business while in her role at USU. And she figured, well, he's my supervisor. I work for him in both roles. No, you work for him in your university role. He was misusing university resources by requesting that staff assistant to process invoices and the computer and the paper and the mailing, everything. He was using the university resources. A clear one I think most of us understand, don't use the P card for personal use. We still see it. We'll see a lot of small meal purchases that are just, it's very clearly can only be 1 or 2 people eating, and usually sometimes it's university employees together. So just make sure you clearly, or if it is something that could be interpreted as personal use, you document how it is business use. If it's something that, okay, why are they buying towels at Walmart? Okay, this is not for my bathroom at home. This is because we were running a 4-H program and they had water games or whatever. Just document what it's for. Okay, the 7th control is open communication. Allow and promote open dialogue. Share good news as well as bad news. be open to concerns from your employees. And also, trust that instinct. When something doesn't seem right, or you feel like you're being requested to do something that doesn't quite sound right, trust your instinct. Question it. If you're feeling pressured to do something, just trust that and look into it and take the time. And like I was talking before, this is the fraud triangle. Anytime we've found fraud has occurred, three pieces are in place. There's pressure. We can't control the pressure. People have financial pressure, or they can have, medical issues that are causing financial pressure. Rationalization. Each of us, this is where we'll talk a little bit more about ethics. Each of us has a different ability to rationalize to what's right and wrong. I deserve this, or I'm underpaid, or some of the things we hear. Or my boss was treating me horribly, and that's why I did this. Or each of us has a tipping point too. When I present ethical dilemmas, when it's just you involved in that decision, you'll make one decision, but when it starts to impact, okay, my kids, I need money for my kids to be able to go to camp, or I don't have enough to meet the bills, or whatever, that's kind of what'll tip people over into the tipping point, when your family members, your parents, grandparents are involved in that decision. So we can't control the rationalization. The thing we can control is the opportunity. That's where it's important to put good internal controls in place. So if people are in a situation where they are feeling pressure, they may have the ability to rationalize, there is no opportunity. That opportunity is taken away because of the other controls, segregations of duties, or there's a reconciliation and review. This slide is not a control, but I thought it was an interesting statistic about who will take that opportunity to commit fraud. 1 in 10, and this was from the State of Utah Risk Management Workshop, so this is within the state of Utah. 1 in 10 people will not commit the fraud regardless. I mean, 1 in 10 of us is honest no matter what situation is put in front of them. 8 in 10 will commit the fraud if all three pieces of the fraud triangle are in place. And you think that seems pretty high, but like I said, when you tip it to, okay, it's going to impact my kids. I won't be able to buy groceries for my kids next week. That's what may tip me over into that, or each one of us. And then the scary one is 1 in 10 will seek, they're predatory. They'll seek a particular position because they know they can commit fraud. We did have one employee at the university that lost her job in one area. It wasn't posted that she was terminated for cause or anything like that. She was rehired in another area and started doing the same thing. She was inappropriately using a P card, and we reviewed the P card transactions, got it shut down. She was purchasing personal things, groceries, hand towels. That's where the hand towel example came from. She was remodeling her house, so buying a lot of things at Home Depot. Then she got terminated from this position, got hired in another one, got a new P card, started doing the same thing again. We saw her name pop up, started looking at the transactions. So there are predatory employees out there. So that, I just thought that was interesting. That the one that really struck me was, though, the 8 and 10. That was surprising. But when you think, each of us has a different point that we can be tipped over. So it's really important to make sure the opportunity is taken away. So the 8th control is documentation and record retention. Documentation, we talked a little bit about this. When you process a transaction, if you have a P card receipt, that it is something that could be construed as personal. I threw out candy for 4-H. We see a lot of food purchased. A ton of peanut butter was purchased by one department, and we're like, what in the world are you using peanut butter for? It was some rat experiment that they were using to feed the rats with the peanut butter. So document. Okay, this is a research experiment, rats, peanut butter. We saw a guy that purchased a barbecue grill. We thought he was just setting up a fun, barbecue out in the backyard. He was doing some experiment with yak dung. And I'm like, okay, but just document it on there. If it's something that could be construed as personal, document what it's for, just even on the receipt. I'm not saying you have to put together a special form. Just on the side of the receipt, you could say, candy for 4-H after group or after school kids, whatever it is, and put your initials on there. Too much information is better than no information at all, and document it as soon as possible after the transaction occurs, because you forget. I mean, you look at it 6 months from now, why did I buy that candy? Why did I buy those towels? And then another protection, a lot of people think if we just keep all these records, it'll be better. No, having outdated records is a risk. You need to get rid of outdated records. Utah State does not have a record retention policy or requirement. What we have to refer to is the State of Utah guidelines. And they are a bit confusing and overwhelming because it depends on the type of document, the source of the funds. The easiest rule of thumb is 7 years. If it's older than 7 years, get rid of it. And with state funding, it needs to be 7 years from the completion of the contract. So when that contract, and that's not always the end date, because sometimes after the end date, there's several reports that come out. So it can be a couple years after the contract end date. So 7 years, safe guideline. You'll be okay there. Utilize the tools and resources we have. We don't have great training. We are working on it, not my office, but other offices are working on improving that training. There is a training website, and it is getting better. Each day it gets a little bit better. So take a look at that, and it goes down 2 different pathways, whether you're a person that has to process the transactions, you're at the detail level, or you're a person that has to approve the transactions at a supervisory level. So take a look at that. Know the policies. If you're not familiar with them, they're on the HR website. Over to the right side of the window, there's a drop-down box, or it lists policies. Review those policies, especially the 500 level. The 100, 200, 400 apply to faculty. 1, 2, and 3, 300 are HR, and 1 and 2 are basically setup of the institution. So those 500 level policies are our operating policies. That's where you'll see our travel policy, our meals and entertainment policy. Look to those, be familiar with those. If you oversee federal funding, sponsor projects, know the related regulations. Those are changing. Right now, we follow OMB Circular A21. That's changing to what's called the Super Circular. And so you'll have to be familiar with a new circular. It's actually A81 that combines all of the nonprofit OMBs into one big one. So we'll have to find what applies to USU. Ask questions. If you don't know, pick up the phone. Call Steve, call me, call the controller's office. I would much rather that you call my office and ask a question before you go through a transactions. If you're like, I'm not quite sure this is appropriate, pick up the phone and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And I can say, okay, where do you want to go? What's your objective? We can get you there, but within USU, because a lot of people think, okay, if I call internal audits or if I call controllers or Steve, or they're going to say, no, you can't do it. In some instances we will, but in most instances we say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? Let me help you get there within the rules, within the boundaries. Okay, the 10th one is the control environment. Like I said, this is core and base to the system. All other controls are useless if you don't have a strong control environment. This is the tone set by those in leadership positions. It's ethical conduct. It's what we observe our coworkers doing, acting, the tone that we've set in the organization. It goes beyond what is merely allowable to what is right. A lot of times when we have audit findings, people will say, well, there's nothing in law that prohibits this, or there's nothing in policy that prohibits this. I'm like, yeah, but think about it. Is it really ethically, morally right? If this were your funding, is this how you'd want it to be spent? And I really like this quote, ethical behavior goes beyond obeying laws, rules, and regulations. It is a commitment to doing what is right as well as what is merely allowable. Allowable is the base level of what we should be doing. We should be making decisions that are above that. Oh, this is not the right presentation. Sorry, technical timeout. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. I have several variations of this. I do. And this was one for business managers that wanted to know about the audit process. And you guys probably don't want to know about the audit process at this point. Okay, so let's step a little bit more into ethical. Like I said, the 10th control environment is base and core to everything else. It relies on a strong system of ethical values. So what does that mean? So basically, I just wanted to lay this out. Ethical considerations. Developing and staying true to our personal value system is a daily challenge. Every day we are tempted with things that go against our value system, whether we get too much change back at the grocery store, whatever it is. We went to a basketball game the other night, and it was $14 to get my husband, my son, and myself into the game. My husband gave her a 20. She handed him back a 20 and 3 ones. And he was like, I mean, if he would have been dishonest, he would have gone forward with that. But he was like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. No. And then she gave him a 10. He was like, no, I need $6 back, honey. I need a 5 and a 1. So, you know, every day we're faced with things. The law is the minimum guide for our decisions, the law or USU policy. And ethical values, I can't say mine are right or yours are right. We all have different ethical values. It's a combination of our personal beliefs and our moral values, basically how we've been raised, that equals our ethics. We're all a little bit different, so there really is no right or wrong. But when your actions collide with your value system, we see personal turmoil. When we have found instances of fraud, people are almost ready for it to be over because they want to be out of the personal anguish that they're feeling, the personal turmoil. We face ethical choices and pressures daily. And if you feel yourself rationalizing that it's only one time or there's nothing in policy that prohibits this, when you start to have that conversation in your head that you're rationalizing, start questioning, okay, is this really appropriate? So I wanted to give you some guidelines. So the real question is, how do I measure, and what are some standards I can apply, some really basic standards? So I found this book called Life Principles, Feeling Good by Doing Good, and it's really a short, easy read, and it's common sense things that we all know. It's kind of those things that we knew in kindergarten but we forget. That just some simple guides that I think if we applied all of these guidelines every day would keep us feeling good about ourselves and about what we're doing. So basically the 5 simple principles to a rich, satisfying, happy life are these principles. The principles have a transforming effect on who we are and where we go in life. They're this: 1, do no harm. 2, make things better. 3, respect others. 4, be fair. 5, be loving. And I'll talk about each of these just a little bit more. The do no harm, that's the easiest thing. Just basically, you don't have to do anything at all. Just don't make things worse than they are right now. It's the most important, but the easiest principle to apply. The second one is to make things better. This one requires a little bit more effort, and it's a little bit more difficult because we have to understand what other people value, because what I think is better may not be better to you. So I have to understand others' values to make things better, and it's applied more selectively than do no harm. Respect others. This is basic in every interaction that we have. I mean, even this presentation, you're respecting me by listening and being present at this presentation. It's an essential moral principle in every relationship, every interaction we have. It's based on the idea that everyone has rights, and there are 3 elements. Tell the truth, keep our promises. If I say I'll call you tomorrow, I'll call you tomorrow. Respect the privacy and others, and keep confidences. So, I mean, you think if we just did those simple things every day, how much better the environment would be for all of us. Be fair. I think we all want to see fairness. It's a 3-fold concept. The first one is distributive justice, how we divide scarce resources. Did I get my fair share? Everybody wants to feel that they've received their fair share. Retributive justice, which is does the punishment fit the crime? How are we taking care of and punishing those that violate? If this person doesn't show up to work for 3 days and doesn't call in and say where they are and nothing happens, do we feel that was not fair? Probably. And then rectificatory justice is, how do we take care of the victim? Are we making things right for the person that was harmed in the situation? The fifth is to be loving. And basically, I'm not saying you have to love your coworker or love the people you work with. This is basically just accepting people and respecting their values and beliefs. You may not believe or value things that I believe and value, but I respect your beliefs, you respect my beliefs. I don't impose my beliefs on you, and just respect each other and accept them for their true self. So I hope you all brought a piece of something to write on, or your iPad, or something that you can keep a little score. We're going to take a quick 10-question quiz about ethics, and nobody will see the answers. Nobody's judging you, so this is just for you. Okay, the first question. After leaving a grocery store, you notice a 6-pack of soda sitting in an otherwise empty shopping cart in the parking lot. Would you A, leave the soda where it is, B, take it and keep it, or C, take it back to the store? Okay, question 2. A friend recently set you up on a blind date which didn't go well. Your friend, who is extremely sensitive to criticism, asks you how it went. Would you A, lie and say it went well, B, tell the truth, or C, thank your friend for the setup but be vague in your answer? Well, we'll have to see. You never know about these things. Okay, question 3. You were at a party and one of your friends has become intoxicated. As she prepares to leave the party and drive home, you tell her that she has had too much to drink and that you will take her home. She rudely tells you to mind your own business. Would you A, do as she says, B, take her keys away from her and arrange for a way to get her home, or C, call the police when she gets on the road and tell them that there's a drunk person on the loose? Question 4. You've just opened your own retail pharmacy. One of your competitors sells cigarettes, which bothers you because you feel that healthcare professionals should do what they can to prevent harm to others. On the other hand, cigarette sales are lucrative, and it is getting harder and harder to make a decent living these days. Would you A, refuse to sell cigarettes, B, sell the cigarettes but give them a lecture about the risks of smoking, or C, sell the cigarettes but without the lecture? Question 5. Your friend asks you if you like the new dress she has, or your wife, or whatever, she has just purchased. You think it would be horrible, but you don't want to hurt her feelings. Would you A, tell her the truth, B, find something about the dress that you do like and mention only that? Oh, rayon, it's so easy to care for. Use language that is accurate but deceptive. It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. Question 6. You see an expensive article of clothing that you want but you can't afford it. Would you A, save your money and buy it later, B, buy it now, wear it once, then return it, or C, sign up for the store's credit card or use the one you have and get it now? Question 7. You and your beloved are having dinner at a fancy restaurant to celebrate your anniversary. When the check arrives, you notice that the waiter forgot to include the expensive bottle of wine you had. Would you A, pay the bill without knowing the weight of the admission but leave a larger tip than you had planned, B, pay the bill as is and leave a normal tip, or C, tell the waiter about the error? Okay, question 8. One evening while watching TV, you discover that you are now receiving a premium channel that you have not ordered. After doing some research, you learn that the cable company has unwittingly made a mistake. It is unwittingly providing you the service without charging you for it. Would you A, do nothing but enjoy the free service, B, contact the cable company to notify them of the error, or C, wait a few weeks, see if you really watch the station that often? If not, call the company and have it removed. Can't tell whether they're done or... Okay, question 9. While you're driving on the highway, a driver passes you and cuts you off as you're preparing to change lanes. You were startled and scared by his actions. Your children are in the back seat. Would you roll down your window and yell at the driver? Would you B, call the police on your cell phone while you're driving to notify them of the incident? Or C, stay calm and do what is necessary to protect you and your kids? And this is really what you would do, not what you hope you would do. Okay, the last question. A celebrity once one of your favorites was recently convicted of a serious offense and sent to prison. How do you feel about that? A, glad the person got what he or she deserved. B, sad that someone you used to admire gave in to less than noble impulses. Or C, numb. This happens more often than not now. Okay, let's go through and score your answers. Take a few minutes. Then tally them up, get a total. Figure that already. Enough time? Okay, let's take a look. Here is the scoring guide. If you scored 10 to 15, basically you do the easiest thing or nothing at all. You tend to take the easy path, which is not necessarily always the best path. Just a few other points there. Okay, if you scored 16 to 25, you're an it depends kind of person. Sometimes you do the right thing, sometimes you don't. It depends on the circumstances. And I think a lot of us tend to fall in this realm, and occasionally it takes courage. It takes courage to stick to the high road all the time. No one is perfect, but ethics demands consistency of behavior when the circumstances warrant. It is not okay to be a saint at home and a sinner at work, or vice versa. And we'll see that quite often in some of our people that we've found that have committed fraud or stolen money. It's never who you would expect. They are people who would, upstanding members of the community, members of their church, whatever. And yeah, it's never who you'd expect. So don't compartmentalize your life into I act this way at work and I act this way at home. Consistency in behavior. If you score 26 to 30, you do the right thing even when it's not the easy thing. You take the high road time and time again, and you set the example for others to follow. I had a person in my office that was like this. Steve, I don't know if you remember Everett. He was one that would be a 26 to 30 no matter what. He always did the right thing. And he was one that everybody strived to be like. Okay, so remember these 5 points. Do no harm, make things better, respect others, be fair, and be loving. And I love this last saying, the reputation of 1,000 years may be determined by the conduct of 1 hour. I had a really good friend that I was friends with for several years, and I ran into her at Sam's one day, and we ended up behind each other in line at the checkout. And it was actually before New Year's Eve, and she was buying lobster tails to cook for New Year's Eve. Well, she had 3 in her cart. The cashier rung up 2. She saw the cashier rung up 2, said nothing. So Sam's, we all know, when you go to the door to check out, you have to show your receipt. So I thought, okay, this is where she'll get caught. And I'm behind her. I see what's going on. I don't know if she knows I saw what was going on. The checkout person checks her receipt, signs it off, lets her go out the door. And I was just sick to my stomach because this person that I'd respected for several years, in a high position of authority at USU, I was just like, wow. I mean, that just shocked me. And then another thing, her 5-year-old son was with her. On the way out the door, she high-fived him and said, we just scored $30 there. They just got away with not paying for a lobster tail. And that just totally changed my whole opinion of that person. So think about that. You can have a reputation of 20 years that I've been at USU for 20 years. If one act of something unethical or dishonest would change the opinion of me. And just a couple of other thoughts. The foundation of our characters lay brick by brick, decision by decision, in how we choose to live our lives. And every time you make a choice, I really like this, every time you make a choice, you turn the central part of you, the part that chooses, into something a little bit different than it was before. So as you're changing, how are you changing? You want to be changing in a positive direction, bringing yourself up or down. And 10 quick things to ask when you're faced with something. What are my options? What do I have to go this route that I'm feeling pressured to do? Are my values being reflected? Is this how I want myself represented? Does this comply with law or policy? Am I following the golden rule? If I were the other side of this, or if this were my own personal funds, is this how I would want it to be spent? Or if I'm on the other side of the transaction, are we purchasing appropriately, giving everybody a fair opportunity? What are the consequences? Have I sought wise, objective advice? Is pressure a factor? Am I feeling pressure that I need to get this done quickly? Is that affecting my decision? Am I rationalizing? This is just one time. I'm just being asked to do this by my supervisor. I'm sure he or she won't ask me to do it again. Am I giving anyone an unfair advantage by taking this action? And would I be okay if this decision were publicized? So whatever your local paper, if you were to read this in your local paper, would you be okay with this decision on the front page of the paper? John C. Maxwell wrote, there are really only two important points when it comes to ethics. The first is the standard to follow. The second is the will to follow it. And in the end, our life is about choices, and our challenge is to choose well. So what I want you to take away from this is what you can do at USU to improve the system of internal controls. Remember that everybody has a responsibility. If you are involved in any process, and if you have a position at USU, you are involved in some process, that everybody has a responsibility. This means we all need to work together. If you see something that's not working, or an area that something inappropriate could occur, bring that up. Let's work together to make it better, to protect everyone, to protect all employees. And just to remind you who we are, you can find my information on the website, contact information, email, call us. We would love to help you guys if you have any questions. All right, do you guys that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions for me.
I was wondering if we could get a copy of the PowerPoint, if you could email that to us so we can present it at the staff meeting.
That would be no problem. Yes, I can do that. I would love to share this information. Okay. The more we get it out there, the stronger it helps us all. So yes, I will share that. What's the best way to do that? I could send it to Steve and you can get it out? Or
okay. Yeah,
would that work?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll send it to Steve Broadbent and I'll have him disperse it to you guys.
And I'll probably send it to the regional directors.
Okay. He'll send it to the regional directors if you didn't hear him.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? You guys, thank you for your time. It's good to see you out there in those extension sites. I need to make a trip and see you face to face. Thanks.